or welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and in today's video we're going to be talking about all of my 5-star reads from the fall. The way I break it down throughout the year is the fall is September through November. I actually had some really amazing reading months September through November, so I have 15 5-stars to talk to you about, and I am just going to share them with you, recommend you some books, and we're going to go through them. So the first one that I have is Entreat Me by Grace Draven. This is a fantasy Beauty and the Beast retelling. The heroine in this one is very protective of her sister. She is basically raising her sister, and when her sister wants to get married to this guy and runs off with him, the heroine follows, and she ends up having a romance with her sister's boyfriend's dad. Does that make sense? Yes. And the hero has this curse on him, and the whole family actually has this curse on them, and that's where the Beauty and the Beast aspect comes in. So the hero is slightly beastly looking, he has this curse on him, and the heroine has a romance with him, and it's a really sweet romance. Grace Draven's books are a little bit slow, but this one worked really well for me. Even with the slowness of it, the beauty of the romance and the way that the fantasy curse element played into it made it so that it was perfect balance of everything, whereas previous Grace Draven books for me have been too slow and not enough plot elements to keep up with the romance. This one worked really well, and I absolutely loved it, and I'm definitely going to want to continue reading Grace Draven and find more that work with that balance, because with that balance they work so well for me and end up being 5 stars. The next one that I have is a historical, and that is The Wolf and the Wildflower by Stacey Reed. This one was so much fun. The hero in this one was actually lost in the Canadian wilderness for multiple years. He was traveling with his friends and he got lost, something like that, and he ends up being lost in the wilderness for a very long time, like years. And the heroine in this one has been raised her entire life as a man. Her father, everyone in the world thinks that she is a man. The only person who knows that she is a woman is her mother and her maid. And she has had all of the privileges of being a man in society. So she went to school, she has a profession, and she actually works as a psychologist with her father. And so when the Dowager Duchess, her son, who is the hero, he comes back. So when the Dowager Duchess calls upon the heroine and her father as psychologists to help the hero reacclimate to society, the hero is able to tell that she is a woman, and they have a romance. And I loved this. It worked so well. It was so interesting, and I just had so much fun. It was with this hidden aspect of the heroine actually being a woman. I just loved that added part of the historical. It made it so interesting, so much fun. I was very captivated, and I loved it. This is probably my favorite Stacey Reed. The next one that I have is King by S.J. Tilley. This is book 2 in the Alliance series, and I've talked about this a bunch because I became absolutely obsessed with this series. The third book in the series is also on my 5-star list, Dom. So King and Dom both made my list. King is about the hero whose name is King, who is one of the heads of this mafia organization called the Alliance, and he ends up killing somebody, and the heroine sees him kill somebody. So he kidnaps her, brings her back to his house, and forces her to marry him in order for her to not be able to testify against him for what she saw. And they have a romance. It's amazing. King is so morally gray, so possessive. He had all of this perfect life scheduled out, and the heroine just comes in and rucks up all of his plans, but I love it. I love the way that the heroes fall for the heroines in S.J. Tilley's books, especially in the Alliance series. And so Dom, which is book 3, the hero, his name is Dom, and he is part of the Italian mafia, I believe, and he is the head of this mafia, and he needs help, and he wants to be part of the Alliance, and he wants them to help him, and so he tricks King's sister into marrying him. She thinks that they met out of fate and by circumstance. She doesn't know who he is, and they get married. in Vegas, drunkenly in Vegas, or she's drunkenly in Vegas. And he shows up at King's door and is like, I married your sister, that makes me part of the alliance. And she is pissed at him. And it is so fucking good. I'm serious. Read these books. They're so good. Obsessed with them. The next one that I have is Saint by Sierra Simone. This one was just really, really beautiful. This is an MM romance about Aiden and Elijah. They were in a relationship for a while, but Aiden suffers from depression and anxiety, and he has a really, really bad night one day, and he is considering killing himself, and he ends up getting this text message, which is a Bible verse, and he feels like this is fate, and so he goes and he becomes a monk. He joins a monastery and he becomes a monk, and he's basically like, this is my calling. This is what allows me to be calm and be happy and live a life. And he was very content at this monastery for a while, and he's about to take his like final vows when Elijah shows up, and they end up having a forced proximity type trip, and Aiden's feelings for Elijah are still very much there, and he is struggling between his faith and his love for Elijah, and also for being afraid that if he does leave the monastery that he'll have the same struggles with his life, with his depression. And it's just this really, really beautiful story. I loved this so much more than Priest. I gave Priest 4 stars, but the romance in Priest was just a struggle for me. This one was so, so sweet and good, and I just really, really loved it. And it was just as like spicy and fun as Priest was, but the elements of the romance, of the true struggles that Aiden and Elijah both deal with were just really well done, and I loved this. So the next one that I have is Stolen Touches by Nida Al-Taj. This is another mafia romance, and this one is about a heroine whose name is, I think, Milena or something like that, and she does not want to be part of the mafia. She's a mafia princess, but she doesn't want to be part of it. Her brother, I believe, is the head of a mafia organization, and she just doesn't want to deal with it. And so she moves away, moves to New York, and she does not inform her brother or the head of the mafia in New York that she's going to be moving there. And she gets a job as a nurse, and she loves her job, loves her work. But when the head of the mafia in New York finds out that she's there, he ends up forcing her to marry him, and they fall in love, and it's an amazing romance. The hero, who's the head of the mafia, he is so morally gray, and he is just he has these kind of like almost psychopathic tendencies, sociopathic tendencies. Even his parents, even his mother, don't think that he would ever like love somebody or allow somebody to help him or be part of his life in such an intimate way, but he falls so hard for the heroine, and it's just so good. This one is definitely my favorite in the Perfectly Imperfect series. It's just so freaking good, and I just absolutely adore the way that the romance went. And this series is so fun in general just because they are quick reads. They're each like just 300 pages, if that, and they're so good, and this one just was so fantastic. I loved it. The next one that I have is Shadows of You by Catherine Cowles. This series is so good, and this book took the cake as my favorite, not only in this series, but I think it's my new favorite Catherine Cowles book. And this one is about Roan, who is a grumpy hero, and the heroine in this one is a single mother, and she is on the run, and she lives in this small town, and she's constantly on edge that the person who she's running from will find her. And she takes in injured animals, and when she finds an injured deer on her property, she calls up wildlife, and Roan works for search and rescue wildlife organization, and he shows up to help with this deer, and they form such an amazing romance. Roan becomes so protective of the heroine, whose name I cannot remember, and it's so sweet. And the heroine is, like I said, she's on the run, and so she is very hesitant to let people into her inner circle because she's like, at any minute I'm gonna have to leave. They could find out about my past. She is struggling, but her daughter accepts Roan so nicely. I love their relationship. It's so freaking sweet, so cute. New favorite Catherine Cowles, absolutely. It's so good. The next one that I have is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This one really surprised me. I'm more of an indie girly, but this one is not only a traditionally published romance, it's also a debut. The author, Julie Soto, has only ever written fan fiction before. This is her first published book, and it was so well done. This is a second chance romance, and it is between a wedding planner and a florist, and this one was really interestingly written. It's written in 2 timelines, which is not something that I normally like, but this one was done really well, where the heroine's POV was only written in the past and the hero's POV is written in the present, and it was so interesting to see them like go together and getting their perspectives but in different timelines, and it was so good. I loved this, and it was such a surprising one where it was like not something that I would normally love, but I think it was done so incredibly well, and I'm definitely going to be looking out for more Julie Soto because I loved the way this was written. I loved the characters and the romance, and it was just so freaking good. The next one that I have is The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This book, Ryan Shea, is an absolute favorite. He is just the epitome of top tier book boyfriend material. This man is amazing. This book was so freaking good. This one is about Ryan and Indy. Indy is Stevie, Ryan's sister's best friend, and she is going through a hard time. Her boyfriend of many years cheated on her, and so she has to leave her house that she lived in with him, and she's now basically homeless. She has no savings, and she can't afford to live anywhere. And so Stevie asks Ryan if Indy can move in with him because he doesn't need the rent and because he has an extra room now that Stevie's moved out, and Ryan very reluctantly agrees. He is the kind of person that likes his space, he likes his privacy, he likes everything just so, and Indy's kind of chaotic, and all Ryan has known of her is this time after her boyfriend's broken up with her where she's been kind of a mess, and so he doesn't really want her to move in, but he reluctantly agrees because he'll do anything for Stevie. And so Indy moves in, and they have a forced proximity, fake dating, best friend's brother romance, and it's so good. Ryan is a basketball player, and he's the new captain on the team, but his coach or the manager of the team isn't sold on him being the captain, so he's trying to get in good with him, and he finds out that the best way to get in with him is to get in with his wife, and so he and Indy end up fake dating so that Indy can become friends. They can be like couple friends with his coach and his coach's wife, and it's so good. It's so freaking good. Ryan Shea, I'm serious, this man, amazing. The next one that I have is Still by Kennedy Ryan. I put off reading this book for so freaking long, and I mean like 3 years I put off reading this book, but I finally read it and it was so good. I knew that it was going to break my heart. I knew that it was going to be really emotional, but I was not totally prepared for it to be emotional in the way that it was. This is the 3rd book in the Grip trilogy, which is about Grip and Bristol. Bristol is a white woman and she is a music producer, and Grip is a black man and he is a rapper, and they have had this very long, very complicated, very angsty, drawn out romance, and still is basically the culmination of all of that. They are finally together, and you think that it would be all nice and happy, but it is not. It is hard work and it is devastating, and the things that the two of them go through are so heartbreaking, and they are an amazing couple. They are so good together. They fully complete each other. They are soulmates, and it's really, really, really beautiful. It's very sad, but it's really beautiful, and Kennedy Ryan is just a absolute genius, and this book is a masterpiece, and every single one of her books is like this, where it's just, I feel like they need to be studied because of the impact that I feel like they have on people when they read them, on society. It is a perfect like glimpse into society, and it is just so, so well done. And I really, really loved it, and I'm so happy that I finally read it. The next one that I have is Pucking Around by Emily Rath. This is one that I've talked about a couple of times now because I'm 100% obsessed with it. It's going to be on my favorite books of this year for sure. Actually, a couple of these books on this list are going to make my top favorites of the year, but this one I know for sure is, and this one is a reverse harem hockey romance. The heroine in this one's name is Rachel, and she is a sports therapist. She gets a job with the Tampa Bay Rays, and she moves there, and she ends up seeing a guy that she had a immediate connection and one night stand with, and she has a romance with him, a romance with his best friend who is also the equipment manager for the team, and then a romance with another player on the team named Ilmari, and the four of them have this absolutely amazing romance together. Jake and Caleb, who are the equipment manager and the guy that she had the one night stand with, also have a romance, and it's just so beautifully done. The communication in this book is on point. I am serious. They are so open, so honest with each other, which I absolutely adored. It made the romance so much more believable, so much more strong, and I truly, truly believed in their romance and their love for each other, and in the fact that this could actually work. I just thought it was so incredibly well done. I am 100% obsessed with the four of them together. I think they're amazing, and I 100% loved this book. Next one that I have is After the Storm by Laura Pavlov. This is the final book in the Cottonwood Cove series, which is one of my favorite series of 2023. I became 100% obsessed with Laura Pavlov this year, and this book was just the perfect ending to the Cottonwood Cove series. It was a beautiful but bittersweet ending. This one is a second chance single dad romance, and it is so well done. The two of them had a really amazing romance when they were younger, but as they grew up, their lives went in different directions, and even though they both still very much loved each other, it wasn't working out, and so they end up having to break up. And now it's years later, the heroine is getting a divorce from her husband, and she moves back to town because her father had a stroke and she wants to help him out, and she ends up seeing the hero again, and her feelings never really went away, neither did his, and all of those feelings just bubble back up to the surface, and they are perfectly destined to be together, and they form this really beautiful little family with the hero and his daughter, and it's just so freaking sweet. I just loved this one so much. It was very emotional and just kind of heartbreaking when you realize like how the second chance went. Like, it really made sense to me. A second chance is not usually my favorite trope, but this one just really, really worked, and I understood why they had broken up in the first place, and I really loved it. Then I have King of Greed by Anna Huang. This is a marriage in trouble romance, which is another one that's not usually my favorite trope, but this one I really, really loved. This is book 3 in the Kings of Sin series, which is a series that I'm absolutely loving. I've really enjoyed each book in it. This was probably my favorite in the series, although I did still absolutely love King of Wrath, so I don't know, maybe those two are tied. But this one is about Dominic, who is a big billionaire, and he didn't grow up with a lot of money, and it has always been his dream to continue gaining money and power and just be somebody who's incredibly successful. And he's been married to, I believe her name is Alessandra, for 10 years. And they had a really strong relationship when they first got married, but as he continues to gain money and power, he neglects his wife more and more, and he finally hits the final straw, and the heroine Alessandra is basically like, I can't deal with this anymore, and she divorces him. And he didn't really realize that anything was wrong, and once he realizes it, he fully grovels to try and get her back, and it was really well done. I really, really loved it, and I had such a good time with it. And I loved that Alessandra totally made him grovel, she didn't just get back together with him as much as she wanted to. A lack of love was never their issue, and I really love that she, even though she loved him, did not put up with things. And I loved that once Dominic realized that something was wrong, he put his full effort into getting her back, and it was just really sweet. I loved it. The last two books that I have are actually from the same series, and they are Twisted Hearts and Deviant Hearts by Jagger Cole. This is a mafia series that I read last month in November and really, really loved. This is my two favorites from the series, and I gave both of them 5 stars. The first one is Deviant Hearts. That's actually the first book in the series, and this one is a arranged marriage between the niece of the head of the Irish mafia and the actual head of the Greek mafia. They have been in a war with each other for a while, and they're trying to join their families and end the war. And in order to do that, they are doing it the best way the mafia does, which is by marriage. And the heroine does not want to marry him, but she has to do her duty as a mafia princess, and they end up getting married and having a really, really amazing romance. I loved their romance together. And then the last one that I have is Deviant Hearts, which is, I think, book 4 in the series, and it's actually about the heroine from book 1's sister, who is another member of the Irish mafia. Her name is Eilish, and she has a romance with Gavin, who is the head of the Bratva, which is the Russian mafia, and they're not on good terms. The Irish and the Russian mafias are not on good terms, but Eilish ends up in a prank gone wrong where she destroys something that was incredibly valuable to Gavin, and in order to get her back, Gavin basically makes her be his slave. He blackmails her into doing whatever he wants her to do, and they end up having a romance, and I loved it. But that is the last one that I had. Those are all of my 5-star reads from the last 3 months, and I would not be surprised if multiple of these end up on my top favorites of the year. I definitely can think of 3 or 4 off the top of my head from this list that I know will be on my top favorites of the year. So I've had some really good reads the last 3 months, but that's gonna be it for this video. So let me know down in the comments what your favorite 5-star read from fall was, and like this video if you liked it, subscribe, stick around, see more content from me, and I hope that you have the absolute best day.